Action Committee, which is an organization that works to support Black candidates and candidates who support the issues of the Black community get into office. So, Ms. Demi Chatters.
Thank you, everyone. So I came with notes. So good afternoon. Thank you for allowing me to be here to spend this time with you. My name is Demi Chatters, and as Lewis mentioned, I wear a lot of different hats in the community. I'm the chair of the Everett Planning Commission, the vice chair and District 2 representative of the Snohomish County Human Rights Commission, an executive board member for CPAC, Snohomish Ebony Political Action Committee, and I'm also a candidate for the Everett City Council position 6. Thank you. But today I am here to speak to you in my role as a community advocate. So I want to take you on a little bit of a journey for a moment. I was born and raised in Seattle, the second oldest of 8 kids in a working class family. And growing up in the 80s was interesting because that era happened to coincide with Hollywood's summer camp movie trend. So if any of y'all are old like me, you remember a lot of movies about summer camp in the 80s. And there were all these fun hijinks always in the movies. So naturally, I desperately wanted to go to summer camp, but there was not money for things like that in my world. My mom was working 12-hour days just to keep the mortgage on our 3-bedroom house paid. And we only had a house because we were able to get one through my dad's VA loan. So summer camp was decidedly off the table for a kid like me. But when I was in high school, there was this program that was sponsored by the AFL-CIO called Labor Summer School. Now you're probably thinking, what kid would sign up for that? Well, me, because I didn't know what it was about. I had no idea what it meant, but I knew that it was a summer camp and it was free. So I wanted to go because that was the right price for my family. There are certain formative events in a kid's life, and this was one of mine. The education that I received from this multiracial, multigender, and multigenerational team of working class educators and organizers threw into sharp relief the history of this country as the history of exploited labor. For the first time, I came to understand the institution of slavery, abolitionism, and the Black liberation movement within the context of the human rights struggle of workers. So I want to get into that a little bit. Juneteenth is unique in that it is one of the few holidays created by working people, specifically by formerly enslaved Black people who are celebrating their emancipation from forced labor. But the road to this end was long and it was arduous, and there were significant points of intersection between the abolitionist movement and the labor movement along the way. In fact, Black Americans were at the forefront of labor actions long before the Civil War. For example, Black people played a dominant role in the caulking trade, which was a craft of great importance in the 19th century shipbuilding industry. A ship was not considered seaworthy unless it was caulked properly to prevent leaking. Now, historic archives tell us that Black caulkers went on strike at the Washington Navy Yard way back in 1835, pardon me, 1835 they went on strike. Perhaps the clearest picture describing the intersection of abolition and labor is painted by scholar and NAACP co-founder, Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois. In his seminal text, Black Reconstruction in America, he tells us, as soon as it became clear that the Union armies would not or could not return fugitive slaves, and that the masters, with all their fume and fury, were uncertain of victory, the slave entered upon a general strike against slavery by the same methods that he had used during this period of the fugitive slave. He ran away to the first place of safety and offered his services to the federal army, so that in this way it was really true that this withdrawal and bestowal of his labor decided the war. Now, it is also true that the trade unions of pre-Civil War America typically excluded Black workers. However, many white trade unionists understood the Civil War to be about slavery, and they enlisted in droves to fight for the North. They understood that a population of enslaved people provided free labor to the wealthy, and this undercut their efforts to achieve freedom as workers through union organizing. And these were the conditions of the day that forced President Lincoln's hand and resulted in the Emancipation Proclamation of 1863. So when the Union Army, which by the way included a great number of black soldiers, rode into Galveston on June 19, 1865 to enforce General Order Number 3, changing the relationship from master and slave to employer and hired labor, it was a huge victory for both human rights and workers' rights. Now, of course, there were a lot of other oppressive and violently enforced stipulations in that law, as well as many others to follow. But it was indeed a milestone that advanced the cause of all American workers. And for formerly enslaved workers, it was a seismic shift and measure of freedom never experienced before in their lifetimes. And that measure of freedom was produced by the 500,000 black workers who won the war through their general labor strike. So the idea of freedom it's an interesting concept because it can be defined in different ways from different perspectives. And Juneteenth is often referred to as Freedom Day. But as we all know, to say that America became a free society in 1865 is objectively untrue. And yet it's a good starting point for understanding the contributions of the Black liberation movement as a primary democratizing force and as a model for intersecting liberation movements both here and around the globe. And it is notable that this work of seeking an ever more evolved version of freedom touches every single person here. So this is why we gather today to honor our past, to celebrate our present, and to strategize for our future. Not because Juneteenth signifies the realization of freedom, but because it was a point of critical mass that shifted the arc of history for American workers, bending it just a little more toward justice. And as we take up the charge of demanding that every human being be extended the dignity and freedom of self-expression to occupy the broadest spectrum of humanity, where we can all express the full range of what it is to be human. As we take up that mantle, we know that our burden has been made just a little bit lighter, and our pathway toward the next iteration of freedom a little clearer. It's an absolute joy to be here with you today, celebrating this incredible day in American history. And before I go, I want to leave you with just one more Juneteenth fact. When Black men secured the right to vote in 1870 under the 15th Amendment, and we won't really go into the nuances of why that is not strictly true, but when they secured the right to vote under the 15th Amendment, voter education and registration became a tradition that emerged at many Juneteenth community celebrations. So as we celebrate today, make sure you are registered to vote. Make sure your friends and your family members are registered to vote. You know, voter turnout is alarmingly low in off-year elections where no president or federal offices are on the ballot. But these down-ballot races elect the positions that decide the policies that shape our daily lives and the futures of our cities. For example, housing, land use and zoning decisions, they have a direct impact on housing costs. So if you have friends, family members who are concerned about housing costs or who want to have your children one day be able to afford a home, let me tell you, it matters a lot who you elect to your city council. Here in Everett, city council members are regularly decided by less than 15% of registered voters. That is not representative government. So that's the assignment that I leave with you here today. Get registered and vote. Vote in the primary. Vote again in November. My name is Demi. Happy Juneteenth.